Let's start going through some of the side-by-side comparisons I want to make between the two philosophies. Origin of rights. This is critically important, and it was critically important to the founders. What the founders were trying to do here was they were trying to put certain bulwarks in place that would ensure the long-term survivability of liberty. One of those bulwarks was the idea that you don't owe your rights to government. Your rights don't come from government. Your rights can't be taken away from government. Government may decide whether to recognize your rights or not, but it doesn't have the power to take them away. The Declaration of Independence, they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, the founders knew that in European history, people's rights changed every time one thug threw out another thug and declared himself to be king. And the founders did not want to see that type of instability in this country. So they came up with this idea, okay, your rights come from God. And that's not going to change every time we have a coup, or every time we have an election, or every time some megalomaniac decides that he wants to be in charge forever, and that you can't do anything about it because you don't have any rights anyway. Woodrow Wilson in 1911, oddly enough, in an address that he gave to honor Thomas Jefferson, Woodrow Wilson wrote this: "If you want to understand the real Declaration of Independence, do not repeat the preface." Now, what he was saying there was that part of the Declaration of Independence that enshrines rights as being natural rights that you have endowed at birth, that's not a basic premise of the American government, according to Woodrow Wilson. Frank Goodnow, or Goodnow, I don't know how you pronounce it, he was another progressive writing in the first part of the 20th century. He was praising the political systems in Europe when he explained, and this is a quote, "The rights which an individual possesses are conferred upon him not by his creator, but rather by the society to which he belongs. What they are to be is to be determined by the legislative authority." Wouldn't that be a scary idea with our current legislature? Economic system. It's always been kind of interesting to me that the same year that our Declaration of Independence came out, 1776, you also had the publishing of a book that in its own right changed the world, and that was Adam Smith, The Wealth of Nations. This was next to the Bible I had read. I don't know if this is one of those urban myths or not, but what I have read is that next to the Bible, The Wealth of Nations was the most commonly found book in the founders' libraries. So these guys embraced the philosophy of free markets and laissez-faire capitalism because, once again, this was a way of keeping wealth dispersed. It's a way of keeping power dispersed. It's a way of people being in charge of their own economic futures rather than having to pay tribute to a government or to a king. Let's see. Woodrow Wilson again. He wrote an essay titled Socialism and Democracy. In that essay, he suggested that socialism, which he embraced, which he admitted he embraced, but this is what he wrote about it. Socialism stands for unfettered state power, which trumps any notion of individual rights. It proposes that all idea of a limitation on public authority by individual rights be put out of view, and that no line can be drawn between private and public affairs, which the state may not cross at will. Well, that kind of sums it up. That we're serfs again. Private property and the redistributive state. The people don't understand the importance that the founders put on property. But as long as this country had a firm concept of private property and what that meant, the government did not grow. It was when we started tinkering with the idea of what private property was that you started seeing the growth in the federal national government. James Madison. Well, first, our founding fathers, the importance they put on private property was because they thought it was essential to personal freedom and liberty, because it allowed the individual human being to gain independence from the state by accumulating land, money, and wealth. And nobody could take it from him. No majority could take it from him. It was his. That had to be recognized. If the government had some intention for that property, that was tough. James Madison, and this is a quote again, "Government has instituted no less for the protection of property than for the persons of individuals." So James Madison is saying your property is every bit as important as your life is, and the government has a responsibility to protect that. The two quotes that I think kind of juxtapose attitudes toward property a lot. John Adams, this is quote, the moment the idea is admitted into a society that property is not as sacred as the laws of God, and that there is not a force of law and public justice to protect it, anarchy and tyranny commence. On the other hand, Karl Marx wrote this: "The theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property." Apparently nobody told Karl Marx that sentences needed verbs, but I guess we can excuse him for being an economist, or sort of an economist. But the one hallmark in terms of property of the progressive era is the concept of redistribution. Heard that one before? The idea that your money and your property are only yours if the state doesn't determine that there is a higher or better use for it. Now that affects us here in Virginia a good bit. Back in 2007, my policy organization, the Virginia Institute, fought for eminent domain reform here in Virginia, and we got it. We went from being one of the worst states in the country in the eminent domain laws that were on the books to being one of the best. The problem was the reform we got was only a statute, and we were going for a constitutional amendment, so we've still got some work to do. But you know, there's a lot of things about this that people don't understand in regards to the power of the state. I'll give you one example of this. Dairy farm. This is an actual case that was in our policy study. Dairy farmer. The government, state government, decides they want his property. The government can do what is called a quick take. They come, they tell you to get off the property, they're taking the property, they'll go to court later. Well, what the government did, what the state government of Virginia did, was they bulldozed the guy's dairy farm. So now if the guy goes to court and he wins, he's got nothing to return to. Well, this is absurd. If the government can do that to, if they have the right to your time, your income, your labor, and your property, what are you left with? You know, maybe your children.